All right, we are back. This is gonna finally, I'm getting to do a full video. We have been running and gunning. We have been busy. Like since April, I've had a workshop or a class or something every weekend, so I haven't been able to make a full video. If you attended some of the courses, hey, I appreciate the support. Thanks for coming out. Then we had a family vacation, went to Colorado, did some fishing, did some hiking, had a good time. Now I'm back home, caught up on chores, and we're gonna move on to some new subjects here, okay? So I want to cover today some bow drill fires. With this hot, dry conditions, it's already in the hundreds here in Arkansas. This makes it a little bit more achievable for us to get some bow drill fires, especially if you're starting out. And that's really what I want to focus. This is going to be to beginner style bow drill fires. I'm going to show you a few tips to make you a little more successful with some bow drill fires. And hopefully you get out there, get to practice right now. That way when wet and worse conditions come up, you'll have a little bit better understanding and be more successful. All right, so stick with it. All right, first off, to address the elephant in the room without getting too far in the weeds, we're using store-bought material. I know, I got it, okay? But we're using store-bought material because that eliminates some of the guesswork, especially if you're a beginner, okay? We know chances are that this wood has been dried and it is good quality for bow drill material, all right? And not everyone has woods, right? Not everyone has a big piece of land that they can just go gather wood off the landscape. At least this way, you can go to the store, get you something. This is red cedar from Lowe's. I think I paid $8 for an 8-foot piece. And you go get this and you can practice right there at your house. But using something like this is not the same as gathering material off the landscape. I cannot stress that enough. This is to help you learn your technique. This is to help you build confidence in it. But if you come to a course here at Arkansas Survival School, we are not using store-bought material because this isn't out in the woods. We are going to build everything off the landscape. If you're using something like this, again, it's a good training aid, but it is not practical execution. This is to help you just kind of understand the mechanics of what we're doing. So before we get into the components of this, I'm going to cut this down a little bit over my forearm length, and that's what we're going to use to make some of our components for our bow drill fire. Give me a second. All right, now that I have this cut down, you can see it's a little bit longer than my forearm. So let's go over the components of a bow drill fire really fast, okay? First off, we're going to have our bow. This is a bow that I've used for several different kits. This is a piece of actual cedar just off the landscape here. You can see I just got a little crook here where I got a bowline knot slipped around. And then I just come down here and I wrap the excess around so I don't have to cut my cordage, right? And that way I can slide this up and down on my bow depending on the thickness of my spindle, so I can use this for different kits. And my thumb is here, depending if I push down my thumb or let up with my thumb. See how that string gets tighter and loose? So you can kind of adjust on the fly. That's like really getting into technical stuff when we're doing bow drill fires. But that's why I want y'all to start doing something like this, because you get a feel for it. You get a feel for it and you know it's not right, and you can start working, okay? And then the next thing that you got to have is a bearing block. And I cannot I cannot stress the fact how important the bearing block is. Now, typically, you could use a piece of green wood out here. It needs to be preferably a hardwood. And that way, when you split down, you're getting to that nice hard center there. Or it can be something like this. This is a piece of fat lighter. This is fat wood. Since it glasses over, since it's so full of resin, it makes a really smooth bearing block. And you can see this one's about right. That knot's kind of in my way, but it fits in my hand. It's not much larger than my fist, but you don't want it sticking out too far, and you want it to be where your hands can curl over nicely. Your spindle is going to be about right here. Your fingers are going to get a little hot. It'll be okay. All right, we got to balance that stuff out. All right, but something like this will last a long time. So again, it goes back to that whole mentality that if we don't have a lot of resources available, if you go on a hike or go out in the woods or purchase it or whatever, if you find you a nice chunk piece of fat wood, you can use this for a very long time as a bearing block. Okay, so something just to keep in mind. When we're talking about this is going to be our spindle and our hearth board. Those are the other two components. And then, of course, finally, we need an ember catch. An ember catch can be a shaving off of this board. It can be something, a notebook, a leaf, something that where we can pick up the ember once it's done, and to prevent it being in contact with the ground in case the ground's wet or conduction or something like that, okay? When it comes to this, we are going to split, we're going to baton a piece of our board off to make our hearth board and make our spindle, okay? When it comes to bow drill fires, it's all about what I call directional friction. We're going to have friction on both sides. I just want the more friction to be down here on the hearth board and not up here in my bearing block, right? And I want this to be straight. So you prevent the amounts of friction or control the amount of friction by the thickness of your spindle. Now, some people will like use a nice big spindle that's bigger and fatter than their thumb, depending on the wood, depending on the material. Absolutely, go for it. Like, no problems. If you're starting out, you can even go a little narrower. Think about people using hand drill fires, like when you're using goldenrod or mare's tail or anything like that to do hand drill fires. They're not much bigger than your pinky, so you don't need this giant thing to get an ember. Yes, it's nice to, but you don't have to have that. So when it comes to something like this, I usually take my thumb, come on top here, and I'm going to do my batoning right here to split this off. That way I have this whole chunk here to start carving into my spindle. Now, I didn't show that because it was pretty simple, but look, that's a nice straight piece. And now I got a nice big fireboard, hearth board, chunking it around here. Got a fireboard, hearth board. I'm going to set this off to the side, and I'm going to start to work on this, okay? So, like I said, it doesn't need to be that thick. I can go thinner on this end. I shave my points down to a more narrow point, almost to like a sharp spear point almost. That's just how I like doing them, just my preference. Some people do a softer, rounder edge. That's also why I cut mine longer than this. So I have that space because I know me making it more narrow up here, I'm going to eat into that more. So I'm giving myself some more wiggle room that as this degrades, I still have plenty enough to get a fire going in case I don't get it on the first, second, or third try, right? I don't want to only make a spindle that's so short I can only use it a couple times and then the whole thing's out of whack, okay? Now when we're carving this down, I'm not going to go through the whole process of carving it down. I'll speed run that for y'all. But you don't want to make this too perfectly round, all right? Like, you don't want to make it too smooth. If you make it too smooth, your bowstring will tend to slip, especially, if I could speak, especially when it gets under pressure, when you're pushing down on it, trying to really get after it. So when I'm carving something like this, especially starting out so straight, I'm going to turn this into almost like an octagon shape. Like, it's going to be kind of squared up on the sides. I'm not trying to make it go overly smooth, but I'm trying to make it the same diameter all the way down. Let me get this carved down, and we'll go from there. Another bonus tip, all right? While you are carving this, I see it all the time, okay? People push this right there on their chest, and they start carving it, or they hold it to their belly and they start carving. If it's hot, especially if you've been doing a lot, you're nice and sweaty. You don't want any sweat, any moisture being on any of these components, okay? So hold this stuff out away from you, lock it around your knee, lock it around a tree, whatever you got to do to keep you from holding it to your body, and carve it. All right, got that all shaved down, right? And so I'm going to make this more of a point like this. Not so much just having that little point on there. Something about like that, right? And I want this to be relatively, or I want it to be really straight, okay? You want it to be really straight up and down. Something along those lines. Okay? Something like that. This being narrow will wear down faster, but this being narrow means less friction. All good. Flip it over. Now this is the side that's actually going to go into our hearth board. You can see compared to my thumb what size that is. I made it a little smaller, but now this is straight. It's roughly the same diameter all the way down there. You can look at it, see if there's any big chunks. That looks like it's going to work with me. Now we're going to go over to our fireboard. All right, so we're going to take our spindle And we're going to go in, coming from this side, come over one, come up some more, right around there. That way we know we're not going to split this out when we start carving. Take your knife, choke up on your knife some, and we're just going to carve a small divot. Now you can see how easy this stuff carves up because it's so nice and dry. Not real wood would act like this. Those of you who've made a couple know exactly what I'm talking about. But like I said, this is beginner level stuff. This is teaching us the technique, the muscle memory that will help you later on when you get worse materials, okay? So now all we're doing is going to make sure our spindle can kind of marry up in that hole, because we want it to, see how it's starting to grind down already. We want this to be able to fit in there, especially when we start applying pressure. This makes it doing this one simple step will make it a whole lot easier on you once you start going to carve it in there, okay? Now, we're going to do the same thing on our bearing block. I'm going to hold my bearing block about like this in my hand. I want this to be the center. You can see that's even where the harder wood is. So I'm going to take my knife again, choke up on my knife, and I'm going to carve a small divot. Now this divot doesn't have to be near as big, and it can be a little deeper because I want this sharp point to be able to marry up in there, like so. Now that I know, I feel like that's where it's going to stay, both these components will stay like that. Alright, so now that we're down here at the ground level about to do our burn-in, what I like to do is put my left foot on here, and my right knee is farther back, because I want all my weight to be concentrated right here. I'm not so much using my muscles to push down. I'm using my body weight by tilting, myself forward onto my spindle, onto my hearth board. And this allows me to lock in my wrist here onto my shin. So I'm directly above, I'm aiming with my eye, I'm directly above where I think my burn-in is going to be. You want all this to be straight. You're going to take your bow, make sure your string is tight, take your point, stab down, and twist up. And it should be kind of hard to lock in, and once it locks in, it may even snap a little bit. I'm working this back down to me so I can hold everything in this hand, okay? Because right now, this shouldn't be the difficult part. I'm sitting here, I'm relaxed. I'm going to get my bearing block, marry everything up. I'm locking my wrist in. I'm just gently pushing down. And see how that's trying to walk a little bit? I'm just slowly going back and forth, pushing down just a little bit to let that kind of find its groove. Let it find a notch. Find where it wants to be. Now that I feel it, I'm pushing down a little harder. All right. Now I have a nice burn-in so I can do some notch carving. All right. First, I want to talk about the spindle. I know I'm kind of doing this out of order. You can see where it started creating a little nipple up here on top of my spindle, right? That's from the bearing block. Well, when this fatter edge starts rubbing on your bearing block, that's called shouldering out. When you start moving, it should feel really smooth. If at any point in time it's starting to feel really difficult or you feel like it's fighting you, chances are it's probably your bearing block and it's probably your spindle shouldering out. So I'm going to go ahead and take my knife and I'm going to go ahead and carve this back down. I'm leaving this edge here, that point that I've already got kind of started, so because I know that fits in my bearing block. And I'm kind of whittling this down because I'm going to have to bow longer to get an ember, so I need to have enough room here to know I can go long enough on the hearth board and not shoulder out where I'm fighting this. It's all about that directional friction. I want all the friction to be from right here to right here on this hearth board, not right here and the bearing block. All right, so when it comes to your notch, You can see the center here, where the center of that, you kind of see that lighter spot. We're going to go 1/3 of the way into the circle. Yes, you can do this with your knife, or you can do it with a saw, whatever you prefer. I'm going to do it with a saw today. I'm going to take just small cuts until I get to the edge of the circle. And then when I get to the edge of the circle, I do the rest with my knife to make sure I don't get too grizzly bear with it and bust something out. And the key to this is you want it to be at a pretty good, like 45-degree angle, just because you want it open enough to get air so it can grow, so it can actually burn. If this isn't wide enough, not enough air is going to get in there, and it's never going to light, because fire has to have air, right? That's one of the requirements. So if we make this wide enough, it'll do it. If you make it too wide, you're going to have to go longer getting more powder for it to get hot enough. So there is a fine balance, but hey, that's why we're practicing. See, I just cut a couple notches in there with my saw. Now I'm going to do the rest with my knife. All right. See how that goes in there? About 1/3 of the way. Oh, there you go. That's a better angle. About 1/3 of the way. I cleaned this up in here as best I could, because you want all that powder falling. And then I even cut a little bit of a notch, carve this out more, allow even more airflow to get underneath when you're pushing this down. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say it before anybody else does. I am not blowing this to a full flame today. I am just making the ember. That is what I want us to practice on. Yes, it does. Again, it does not count. It doesn't count anyway because we're using store-bought material. I got it. But I really want you to focus on the carving and the technique. When students come here, that is what they struggle with 90% of the time. If I can get you to reliably get an ember, we will get you to where you're processing and blowing something to flame, okay? This is where people tend to struggle. This is what tends to kick their butt, because it's like a full body motion and it's a lot of feel. You got to just know how it feels right. And so that's why we're doing this, okay? So I'm going to get my ember, but in this scenario, the reason why I bring that up, in this scenario, before we went over here, we had everything ready. We'd have our fire lay ready, we'd have our bird's nest ready, and then we would get over here and make an attempt. I'm going to grab some of these shavings. I'm carving up my wood here because I know this is dry, and I'm going to lay it down. This is going to be act as my ember catch. Let's see if we can get an ember. All right, I got a nice fat piece here for my ember catch. Now when we're getting this down here, we want to make sure this is level. Make sure we're not rocking anything crazy, because if there's space underneath your board when you're moving your feet and everything, you're going to be scattering your powder everywhere, and you don't want that. You want it to be concentrated. I kind of like down here, that ground's really hard. This isn't packed as much, so I feel like it's going to catch a little bit better. So I'm going to put my ember catch right there. And of course, that would be to catch our ember so we can move it to a bird's nest or something like that. You notice I haven't set this down yet because we're going to practice like we play, right? I'm going to get my bow here. You hear how tight that is? Got it nice and tight. Now I'm going to try to talk us through this. When we're going here, hey, the first 30 or 40 seconds, we're going pretty calm. We're just going through the motion. We're heating everything up. We're going to be seeing if powder's falling down here. That's what we're going for, okay? After that first 30 to 45 seconds, then we're going to go full bore, pushing down hard, putting everything into it for another 35 to 45 seconds. That's rough math. It all depends on the board, depends on the conditions, but I'm trying to give y'all something to go off of. I'm straight up and down, my knees back. I'm locking into my wrist, marrying everything up here. And I'm just going to start going. Nice and easy. I'm not going hard. I'm just pushing. You can hear it squeaking a little bit. I can already see smoke. I'm seeing if powder's falling. I see some powder falling. And I'm going to start speeding up. Taking control. Move it off. Now we got time. We're not in a hurry. We're just letting that breathe a second. We're letting ourselves breathe. Let it catch. You can still see it smoking. I'm going to bring it closer. And we're just letting that go. It's still burning. We'd have plenty of time. All right, like I said, it is 100-some degrees out here, so I'm hot. But I'm still just letting that smolder. I haven't touched it yet. You see I got plenty of time. Now, if it was wet, humid conditions, that would change, right? But right now that's nice and dry. Every once in a while I'm fanning it a little bit. It's finally starting to glow, so now it would be ready to throw into a bird nest and start blowing it to flame. If this is light brown, you're not pushing down hard enough. You want it to be black, like coffee grounds black. That's how dark you want it to be. And you saw, once I started going, powder started filling up, and I burned about, a third of a way through my board. I shouldered down here. See, I remember how much I started with, and now I went down. That's why you got to extend that stuff out, okay? All right, there you go. Nothing to it. Bow drill fire, right? Piece of cake. No, I'm joking. Bow drill fires are really fun. Long story short, carry a lighter. But using something like this just eliminates the guesswork, because with this stuff, like I said, you kind of know that the wood is already good material. It's already solid. So you can really just focus on your technique, and then, gathering material and learning material, that can be lessons learned either in the field or out of school or whatever you're doing, right? So it's just my thoughts. I hope that helps people out. Go to ArkansasSurvival.com, check out our upcoming courses, and as always, thanks for watching.